Okay. Now, may I ask all of you to consider donating to one or more of our worthy projects. Now, details of how to donate can be found on our website. Simply follow the donate menu button, and this will take you to our donations page. Now, that features our centenary project, the Rotary Foundation, and also our projects in Zimbabwe, Cambodia, and South Sudan. Your donations are needed. They are critical to the successful outcomes of these projects, so please consider donation. Now, please be aware that most microphones will be muted during the meeting. Questions and any comments may be submitted via the chat function throughout today's talk from our guest speaker, Amanda Mackenzie. Welcome, Amanda.
Hi.
Before Amanda speaks, Rotarian Karen Lobley, AM, will talk about our newly founded Climate Action Group, and Karen will introduce Amanda. Please note that all chat comments are viewable by the meeting host, so just be aware of that. May I now hand you over to our club president, Fatima Ali, for welcome to the country and a few words on our club activities. Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn. Now, can I make sure that you can hear me? Yes? Good.
Loud and clear.
Loud and clear. Thank you. Well, first, let me acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land on which we meet and wherever you are, and pay my respect to the ancestors and elders past, present, and emerging. Fellow Rotarians, guests, and friends, and I believe we have international friends today. So welcome to Todd from Texas and Ranjin from Nepal, and all of you, wherever you are as well, welcome. Welcome also to our speaker, Amanda Mackenzie. We look forward to hearing you later on. Before we start with today's proceedings, let me say a few words about what I've been thinking about in the last few days. I was thinking of the word hope, particularly because of what we are experiencing, I suppose. And I looked at the definition of hope. Hope is an optimistic state of mind that is based on the expectations of positive outcomes with respect to events and circumstances in one's lives or the world at large. So as we confront almost daily or hourly news reports about the rising cases of coronavirus, additional measures to restrict exposures to the threat of this insidious virus, and concerns about our health and the well-being of our loved ones, we become very anxious. And I believe probably most of you are anxious. So fear is indeed real, and so is hope. In these moments, hope is really important because it can make the present moment less difficult to bear. If we believe that tomorrow will be better, we can bear the hardship of our present. I know they might seem light and trivial words, but they are real. It is about how we think and how we feel and how we support each other. And this is not a way of saying to you, this is a lecture how you should feel and think, but it is a way to say, we are with you, we are supporting you. And as Rotarians, we are together in this journey, not just here in Australia, but globally as well. The pandemic has not just brought mayhem in its wake, but also opened new possibilities of transformational change. As Rotarians, we have and always been agents of positive change. It's remarkable to read and hear of amazing stories of Rotarians around the world, not just in Australia, but everywhere, of stories of kindness and of care for each other. Some of these stories you hear about how Rotarians were responsible to buying protective gear or ventilators, or providing food to people in need, or just connecting with each other and checking about the well-being of each other. There are many stories on the list. If you want to have a look and check, there are many. But what they do demonstrate for us our ability to embrace difficulty and turn them into opportunities, opportunities to bring hope to others. And these days, indeed, we need abundance of hope. But let me ask you as well, when you give hope to others, save some for yourselves and some for your family and for your loved ones. Speaking of hope, we have, and resilience today, we launch our climate action group. And the launch of this group is really very much a hopeful project for us and a hopeful initiative for a better future for our humankind and a better future for the next generation. So I'll hand over now to our chair of the Climate Action Group, Karen Lobley, who will talk about the launch of this group and talk about the more details about this group. And she will also introduce our speaker, Amanda Mackenzie. Karen, over to you now, my dear.
Thank you. I want to acknowledge that I'm on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I know we're all on different lands probably today. As mentioned, I'm the chair or the current chair of the Rotary Club of Sydney Climate Action Group. I'm not a climate scientist, but I've always been interested in science and how things work. From around the age of 10, I would look through my older brother's telescope to see the moon, the stars and the planets. And I soon realised what a small and vulnerable place our planet Earth is. I've been passionately interested in climate science for about 20 years when I heard the term wicked problem for the first time. That is a problem that is so complex there is no single solution. In 2006, I went to Antarctica with Tim Flannery's book, The Weather Makers, in my suitcase, and I couldn't put it down. It was easy to read and understand all the interdependent systems that keep our planet stable, sustainable, and healthy. And so I came to understand that we are facing an existential threat. 40 years ago, researchers discovered that our use of coolants and propellants were creating a hole in the Earth's ozone layer, which protects Earth from harmful UV radiation from the sun. The international community came together to sign the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer, and subsequently chlorofluorocarbons were globally banned. In 2016, a climate emergency declaration was launched in Australia and globally. And since then, in Australia, close to 100 jurisdictions representing 8 million people have declared a climate emergency, including the government of the ACT and South Australia's Upper House. On the homepage of the Rotary International website, Rotarians are described as people of action and problem solvers. And most recently, Rotary International has added the environment as a 7th focus area to our existing 6 focus areas. So strongly do they feel the threat. Our new group will hear from scientists, economists and farmers about the causes of climate change. But we will not only hear about problems, but also about solutions. As Damon Gamow said, if you're going to sound the fire alarm, you have to show people the exits. The Climate Council came into being in 2013 after the Climate Commission was disbanded, and it is funded solely by public donations. Our speaker, Amanda Mackenzie, its CEO, was instrumental in its rebirth as an independent organisation. It carries out research, educates and advocates. Its publications are for organisations like Rotary to use in their work on protecting the environment and reversing climate change. One such publication is the Climate Action Toolkit. At 6 p.m. on the 6th of August, the Rotary Club of Sydney Cove are holding a Climate and Peace Forum, and some eminent speakers, including Professor Leslie Hughes from the Climate Council, will be speaking at that. A link to register for that event will be on our website and in our upcoming newsletter. our first climate action group meeting for the club, and everyone is welcome to come and more, and bring your friends. Will be at 5:30 p.m. on Monday, the 10th of August. As Ross Garnaut says, you can't build a future on pessimism. And so I introduce Amanda Mackenzie. Thank you.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, and thank you for having me. I'll similarly acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which I'm meeting with you, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and also to those traditional owners of the land in which you join us today. It's lovely to be here, and I've been invited to speak a bit about the climate challenge that we all face. So what I thought I'd do is speak a little bit about the challenge, but then move on to talking quite a bit about the solutions. Today's forum comes at a really opportune time for us at the Climate Council. We've just released a report today looking at the jobs that can be created in an economic recovery that both get people into work, of course, but then also set us up for the future by tackling one of our biggest risks, climate change, at the same time. So I wanted to start by asking you to board a spaceship with me. So let's imagine that Elon Musk has gone and maybe created lots of little ones for us to leave our homes on into space. And as we take off, we start to look down on the earth and we see the cities and streets of our towns or our suburbs or our cities shrinking to the size of little toys. So I'm in Melbourne, so I can see the land to Melbourne's west and north. I can probably notice that there's not many cars on the road due to the lockdown. Gradually, as I go higher and higher, I can see Bass Strait opening up. If it was over the summertime, I could have seen the smoke from fires coming up from the Gippsland region. But if I was to look north, I would have seen fires burning right from the hinterland of Brisbane down to Tasmania. Those Australia's beautiful forests all aflame almost simultaneously. As we keep going up into space, we leave the Earth's atmosphere and then we can turn around. And this is what many astronauts have done over time. Look back at this tiny shimmering green jewel suspended probably in the deep chasm of space. As far as we know, it's the only oasis of life in that vast desert beyond. I bring this up because I think it's strange that in science fiction movies, we always think about aliens coming to Earth to steal our resources, our water and our minerals, but there's plenty of those resources all around the universe. What's really unique here is life. It's within all of us, these brilliant creative molecules that evolution has wrought over millions of years of trial and error, the enzymes, the proteins, the DNA, these amazing molecules and chemical reactions working together to create billions of us, these breathing, thinking, living creatures, human beings that have the capacity for love, for empathy, ability to study the universe beyond us. And when we look back from that spaceship on Earth, we suddenly may feel humbled or awe-inspired by what we see. And the discussion about climate change, which has been so vexed over so many years, becomes much more simple. You can't see the lines between countries. You can't see the squabbling of politicians. You can't see the clamouring of vested interests. You can't even see the coal-fired generators or the coal mines from that height. But you can see the atmosphere, and you see it because of the swirling clouds that go all around the Earth. And I think from that height out in space, it becomes a little bit easier to understand the science of climate change. Basically, there's an array of gases that wrap around the world, and they act like a greenhouse. So if we were to step from our spaceship right down to the surface of planet Earth, we'd notice a huge temperature change. We'd recall that there was warmth, like opening the door of a greenhouse and stepping inside. And that's exactly what the atmosphere does. It traps heat. So we are, as you probably are well aware, add greenhouse gases to the atmosphere every year, particularly carbon dioxide, that is raising the heat of the atmosphere. And that's the simple science that we can see from space. We burn fossil fuels, coal, oil and gas through our transport, our energy, our industrial processes, and that pollution acts like a greenhouse, traps heat. The more we burn, the more heat is trapped, And so for the last 200 years, the Earth's temperature has been rising and rising and rising. It might not seem like much when we look at the overall Earth's temperature. It's about a bit over 1 degree higher than it was roughly 200 years ago. But that's a huge amount of extra heat in the system. The difference between an ice age and a warming period, so New York under a couple of kilometers of ice versus New York today, is 5 degrees. So 1 degree is actually a huge change in the Earth system. And when we look at it from space, the thing that kind of strikes me is, imagine running the biggest experiment ever on this only oasis of life in the universe that we absolutely all depend on as our home. And there's often this idea that the economy is somehow separate from humanity, or the environment is separate from humanity. But of course, we're all dependent on the environment. There's that episode of Clark and Daw where Clark's an oil executive and he says, you know, there's a tanker leaking oil, but he's towed the tanker beyond the environment. Of course, there's no beyond the environment. We're all within it on Earth. For the Climate Council, we've released a lot of reports on the consequences of climate change for Australia. And Australia is one of the more vulnerable countries because we experience almost all of the different types of extreme weather events, and we are the land of droughts and flooding flames. The bushfires over the last summer, I think, were deeply shocking to all of us. Just the sheer extent of those fires, the extent of the smoke, the damage that smoke caused. 450 people lost their lives from smoke alone. And then obviously the destruction of the fires themselves, 1 billion animals perishing in those fires. Not to mention the human life, properties, and whole towns devastated as a consequence. I think that the consequences of climate change have been well articulated. Fires are one aspect, drought is another aspect, flooding, extreme heat. All of these different types of extreme weather events are fueled by that extra heat that I talked about in the system. And I could go on and on about the different statistics around record-breaking extreme weather, or the changing nature of bushfires, or the changing nature of floods around the world, the changing, the consequences for agricultural land, etc. But what I'd like to do is just skip forward to the solutions, because I think we've all heard quite a lot about problems in the last few months. And I think what we really need to do is hone down on, well, what do we do next? And so I wanted to get into this report that we've launched today. We've called it a Clean Jobs Plan. And we've identified the fact that we're facing a number of crises at the same time. So we've gone through this pandemic, which is, I'm here in Melbourne in lockdown again. The economic consequences will be ongoing for some time. And then you add the climate-fueled bushfires that we experienced over the summer that many communities are still feeling the consequences of. So we've described it in the report as these two crises that are coming together. But how about if we could look at the economic recovery as a great opportunity, or even a once-in-a-generation opportunity, to make very targeted investments, targeted policy, to rebuild our economy to tackle long-term challenges like climate change? Where can we find the opportunities to create win-win solutions? So what we've done in the plan, and I'll share you one of the screenshots, is to identify 12 different areas. Maybe I'll just send it around at the end. I don't think it's enabled in this Zoom meeting, but, oh, sorry, here it comes. So here's the slide that hopefully you can all see here. So there's 12 different policy areas, and for each one we've identified the number of jobs that can be created. And we've done this with Alpha Beta, who is an excellent economic modelling firm, research and consultancy firm. So the first big ticket item for Australia is renewable energy, and this probably doesn't surprise you. We're the sunniest country in the world, we're one of the windiest. But it's not just about solar plants and wind farms, it's also about transmission infrastructure, it's about big batteries. And what we are pushing, not just in this report, but also in our other work, is that we can go well beyond 100% renewable energy. So we're not just about powering our electricity system, but also powering other processes that can be powered with renewables. So public transport is an obvious one, electric vehicles as we move to more electrified transportation, more manufacturing, etc. And this puts Australia at a major strategic advantage globally because we have just so much sun, so much wind, we've got so much space, so much potential for batteries, and the costs in each of these areas is declining so rapidly. We, in the same way that we made fossil fuel energy a strategic advantage in the past, for the 21st century, we can make renewable energy our strategic advantage now and into the future. So we've identified 15,000 immediate jobs in that area. Ecosystem restoration is another big ticket item, particularly for regional communities. It's an area where you often don't need highly skilled people. So people who have been displaced from tourism or hospitality could have jobs in this area, provided they're in the right locations, and projects can be highly targeted too. So these are the sorts of things. It's restoring landscapes that have been degraded, which allows that landscape to hold more carbon. So it's not in the air, it's in the land, which can make land more productive for agricultural reasons. It also means that you hold in runoff, so pollution or nutrient runoff that might go into areas like the Great Barrier Reef, for instance. So the Great Barrier Reef is obviously at risk from climate change, but it's also at risk from pollution and runoff. So you can marry up these solutions where we can find the win-win for finding jobs that protect the reef, protect our greatest tourism asset, one of our greatest fishery assets, but also to be restoring that landscape near the reef and getting people back into work. And the third big ticket item I thought I'd mention was organic waste management. There's been a lot of conversation about preventing as much going into landfill. So organic waste management, better collection and processing, there's some easy wins there with another 10,000 jobs. You can see as you look through that slide that there's other areas as well, retrofitting buildings, public buildings or residential, electric vehicles, and research and education, and green hydrogen. Green hydrogen's been talked about a lot as a potential industry, and it certainly is one for Australia. Again, it's producing a fuel that comes from renewable energy, so hydrogen can be used in vehicles and other things. And that's an opportunity particularly once we're going beyond 100% renewable energy, we can be thinking about these potential export industries to be exporting Australian sun through a fuel like hydrogen to the rest of the world, where in some places they don't have the same renewable energy resource as we have here. I'll just stop sharing my screen. So that report has come out today, and some of the other things I just wanted to mention from what we found is that I think that there has been this narrative I mentioned earlier about the economy and the environment being opposed. I think it's really critical for those of us that are trying to make the case for action to show very clearly that it's actually, they're one and the same. If we are fundamentally dependent on a healthy environment, and that means that we can structure our economy to get good jobs that do good in the world. And so that's what this plan is all about. Overall, there's 76,000 jobs that the report finds. And what we've done is for each of the different states, identify 5 areas that are a priority for that state. For instance, in Queensland, the big ticket item is landscape restoration, where in New South Wales, public transport and active transport seem to be the top ones. And overall, we also crunched the numbers on what does it mean, public investment versus private investment, because obviously governments can't fund all of this. And what we found is that on average, every dollar of public spending unlocks another dollar in private investment. And in renewable energy, that's particularly the case. Every dollar of public spending unlocks another $3 in renewable energy spending. So we're really excited to come across that because it is, again, like finding that win-win-win. And I think Australia, part of the I've been asked in the media today, how come if it's such a winning plan, why isn't it being done already? And I think it's partly that there's been such a vexed climate conversation in Australia for so many years that when I started working on climate change 15 years ago, it was primarily a moral issue. We're saying it will cost to act, but we've got to act because it's going to damage the future of our children and grandchildren. Well, that is still 100% the case. The moral argument is sustained. But now the economics is caught up with the moral argument. And actually, with the cost of solar, wind, batteries all dropping exponentially, and with value being placed on things like ecosystem restoration increasing as we understand the value of good soil and carbon in landscapes, etc., the economics is now caught up to the point where we can find these win-win-wins, where it's about, let's get people in jobs, let's tackle climate change, but let's also build the industries of the 21st century that can set Australia up to be the renewable energy powerhouse that we really should be in the world. So I might pause there, and if there's any questions or comments, I'm really happy to answer them.
I just hit myself off mute there. Yes, we have a question come in. I think on an earlier slide, we were talking about employment out of renewable energies, etc. The question from Jeremy Wright is, how does the employment prospects that you're proposing, or you've touched on, stack up against the employment prospects if we continue with current fossil fuel investments?
So the challenge for fossil fuels in Australia is that there's very little proposals that will be successful in investing in any new fossil fuels in Australia, particularly coal. I think the economics of coal just don't stack up at the moment. So there are some existing jobs in coal plants and in mining, but they're being increasingly automated. So the jobs in that industry have declined over time. In gas, there is a public push for more gas, but the economics again around gas don't stack up. Since we've linked our gas market to the international gas market, it's increasingly volatile over time, and it's been harder to get up gas projects in Australia purely from an economic perspective. I think that the government will probably federally support some gas projects, so maybe there will be some jobs in gas, but I think it's unlikely to go ahead without quite substantial public investment. So we didn't do a comparative analysis between the two, but what we can see is that when you look at the renewable energy industry globally, it's clearly a growth industry, whereas fossil fuels, particularly in coal power stations, etc. in Australia, burning fossil fuels for power is contracting.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Question from Charlie Allen. COVID-19 has an impact on global supply chains. Now, what is your view on the shift from globalization to localization? And I would say this is in the context of climate change, of course.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one too. So there's a lot of enthusiasm in the public for doing more domestic manufacturing and not being as reliant on others across the world for our domestic manufacturing. This could dovetail quite nicely into this, the planning around Australia becoming more of a manufacturing hub by relying on more clean power, cheap clean power in the Australian context, and particularly the higher up our percentage of renewable energy. I've been mentioning these numbers beyond 100%. There are plans suggested for things like 500 or 700% renewable energy, where we could become a manufacturing hub using this very cheap, clean energy. Those are quite, they're very much in the sort of planning and ideas phase, but that's definitely possible in terms of a refocusing on Australia's manufacturing. Localizing supply chains are helpful as well in terms of reducing emissions. There's a lot of pollution that comes from global shipping and air travel, shipping things by air as well. So there's an advantage in doing that. That said, I think that the idea that COVID will change everything forever is probably not the case. It will change everything substantially for a few years while we get it under control, but presuming there is a vaccine at some point. And I think that other times where there's been economic downturn, it hasn't necessarily resulted in better environmental outcomes long term. So they don't necessarily come hand in hand. It's got to be quite deliberative.
Thank you. A question from David Hirsch. What is preventing the kind of bipartisan support that we're seeing with COVID-19 or around COVID-19 from occurring in climate change?
Yeah, well, this is a decades old question, isn't it? And there's been a great essay written in the quarterly essay this month about just that exact topic. I think that there's a number of reasons. One is around vested interests. Fossil fuel vested interests have played a huge role in Australia in preventing action, and they have been entwined in both sides of federal politics and acted as a handbrake. I think that there is I think it is just a very big change program. You know, we are asking humanity to substantially change the way that we're doing business over time, because we're moving from the major fuel source to a different major fuel source. And so inevitably that sort of change, I think, comes with a lot of opposition, but this opposition has been incredibly well organised and well resourced. So things like casting doubt on science is such a contrast to COVID in Australia. So I think that's a really interesting analogy to draw, is that COVID in Australia, both sides of politics have at least accepted the science. There might be differences in how different governments have dealt with the problem, but at least they all accepted the scientific basis. We see that has not happened in some other countries like the United States, where there's been, there's these political debates over masks and things like that, which are just crazy and mean that there's not that sort of basis. So in Australia, I think I'm hoping that over time we can at least get to that point of acceptance of a base level of understanding with which then we can move forward.
Thank you. This is a related question on bipartisanship. This is from Paul Mackenzie. UK seems to be a better approach, less debate in Parliament and better bipartisan approaches and actions. Should Australia be doing the same, like the UK? Less debate, less talk and more action?
Yeah, absolutely. And Conservatives in the UK have been some of the biggest proponents for action. Lord Deben, for instance, led the UK independent climate body that made a whole series of recommendations around how the UK should act, and many of which were taken up. So they don't have the same political divide. Ideally, that would be the case in Australia. I think that we still obviously have a long way to go. What buoys me is that the state governments are now taking a lot of initiative. So Matt Keane, the Environment Minister in New South Wales, has been really leading the charge with his net zero plan. The NT government recently signed up to 50%, a net zero by 2050, which means that all the states and territories now have a net zero target by 2050, a de facto national target. So that action that's happening on both sides of politics at the state level is now leading Australia's response. And unfortunately, that hasn't trickled up to the federal government. But yes, we'd like to see less talk and more action at the federal level.
Okay, thank you for that. Question here from Bernard McLeod. As the world as a whole can spend $11 trillion on an invisible threat, why is it such a challenge then to spend the necessary money on an either bigger invisible threat we all face, regardless of age, health, wealth, or location?
I think human beings struggle to focus on issues that are slightly over the horizon. I think we're very good at focusing on things that are immediate. And so I mentioned when I started working in climate change 15 odd years ago, it did seem like very much an over the horizon problem that we could tackle slowly. And we need to make sure that the urgency is very much illustrated. So I think the bushfires over the Australian summer brought it home to many people that this isn't an over the horizon issue, it's here now. But unlike COVID that just is continuing in its level of threat, the perception of the climate threat waxes and wanes depending on what the extreme weather events are that are occurring at that particular time. And it can be hard to get the level of sustained coverage that we're seeing in something like COVID. So for instance, the Great Barrier Reef experienced another major bleaching event in April this year. You probably don't know about it because we couldn't get any media to cover it. They had too much going on with the immediate threat of COVID, which is necessary. You know, we need to be talking about that immediate threat, but we need to have a way of addressing these not even very far over the horizon issues, like it's certainly all around us now. and every moment that we delay is setting us up for disaster, essentially. So I think that we need to be constantly making climate change relevant. It needs to be about making it local, making it about today, making it about people, not polar bears, and showing that the solutions are very much available and can happen now. So it's not just this big problem that I can't have anything to do with. We all have something to do when we're tackling COVID. We can stay home, we can wear masks, etc. It's very much more tangible for people.
Okay, thank you. As I think topical, what's happening now and what action can we take now? Diane Quinlan mentions the AFR editorial today, which supports the Santos Narrabri project, which is 850 gas wells. And this is based on science, so the decision is meant to be, I assume. Now, the vast majority of submissions are against the project. The New South Wales Independent Planning Commission is assessing the project presently. How confident are you of a good outcome for the environment from this process?
We'll certainly be, we've made submissions to the Independent Planning Commission, and we'll continue to make representations to them in this process. I think that I'm not necessarily confident we'll get the right outcome. When the AFR referred to the science today, they're referring to Santos's science, which, a gas company, surprise, surprise, has science that affirms what they want to be true. It's interesting, the discussion about gas is now top of the agenda, and it's moved from being coal to being gas as being the big push. Narrabri has been quite a long-term push, but gas is highly polluting. It's still a fossil fuel. If you account for the whole supply chain of gas, so the transportation, the mining, it's called fugitive emissions, the emissions that escape along the way from gas, it's actually often almost as polluting as coal. So this sort of idea that gas is clean, we can use gas as a transition to renewables, is all just based on old data. The new science says, we can't use any more fossil fuels, gas or coal. So we've made very clear to the Independent Planning Commission what the science is around gas, and hopefully they take that into account.
Thank you. Here's the shortest question we've had so far, but one I think that be interested, obviously, to hear the answer. From David Hirsch: how do we export renewable energy?
That's a great question, and I should have made this clearer in my presentation. So there's a number of ways to do it, some of which are more or less tested than others. So one is through cables. So at the moment, Basslink from Tasmania to Victoria exports renewable energy from Tassie, from their hydro facilities. They're also looking at having a second cable, which would be exporting wind power to the mainland as well. Mike Cannon-Brooks and a consortium of donors have been, or investors have put together a project called Sun Cable, which is looking at exporting solar energy from the NT to Singapore and Southeast Asia. So that's sort of tangible through cables. The other way is to make hydrogen and then export a fuel. And that fuel, when burnt, is essentially burning Australia's sunlight that we've converted into hydropower. Hydrogen power. So those are two different ways.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, our next question is from Paula, and she mentions how does modern monetary theory understanding change Australia's ability to roll out climate solutions rapidly to create jobs and reduce emissions? And she's kindly provided a link to a video clip that Alan Kohler did on a concise explanation of MNT, but I don't think we'll be watching that now, but any comments? What's your
Well, Alan Kohler, I greatly respect and has written great stuff on this issue, so I imagine his explanation is excellent. I can't comment specifically on modern monetary theory. I'm afraid I'm not across that in a great deal of detail, but I would say that there's a number of schools of thought around addressing climate change. One is addressing it within the current parameters, and one is the anti-capitalism, we need to overthrow the system, we have to change everything. There's sort of a spectrum of views between the two of them. I land on the view of we have to change it within the current parameters, because we simply, regardless of the arguments, we don't have time to do it another way. This is incredibly urgent. We've got to do it quickly. So let's use the systems we have in place now, and we can use technology. We can use the capacity of capitalism to make change actually very quickly around good technology and where the money is moving in the right direction. So I think with targeted government investment to encourage capital to go in the right way, which has happened already in terms of renewables, countries like Germany have made really strategic investments, which has helped the world to move towards more solar. I think we just need to use capital, use technology, and a range of other solutions at our fingertips now to make the change.
Okay, I think we're getting close to the end of question time. We've got probably time for a couple more questions here. Here's one from Anurag Vathith. How can solar energy adoption be improved in the residential segment? Are subsidies, for example, on solar batteries, are they on the horizon?
I think in many jurisdictions, subsidies for solar batteries will be part of the mix. In our jobs modelling, we did find that community energy and batteries could create a whole raft of jobs as well. That was one of the other opportunities identified. And Australia already has a lot. I think this gives you an illustration of how quickly things have changed. When in 2006, there was about 1,000 panels on roofs. Now there's 2 million homes with panels on roofs. It's just a huge scaled adoption. And we'll probably see that with batteries as well, and that dovetailing into electric vehicles too. So there'll be enormous change in the next 10 years driven by market and consumer choices.
Okay, thanks. And a question here from Kerry Wade, and it's related to that last one then, and I guess it's looking at the impact as well as the opportunities. You might not have the exact figures here, but how much has solar and wind been subsidised in Australia over the last 15 years? There's multiple parts to this. I'll go through quickly. How much have electricity prices risen in that time? And how many jobs have been lost by price rises? And meanwhile, what reduction to worldwide emissions have our efforts actually resulted in? And I guess balanced also by the fact that new jobs are being created. So how does that all pan out?
Yeah, it's a multifaceted question, but there's a number of things to say on it. I think first just dealing with what is Australia's role in the world, and essentially that question goes to, does it make any difference if we do some work here? What surprises people is to know that Australia is actually the 15th largest emitter globally. So 180 countries pollute less than we do. So we're not as big as China or the US, of course, but we're still bigger than a lot of other countries. So when people say, you know, we're 1.3, 1.4% of global emissions, there's actually a lot of countries involved with a lot of people. So we're actually in the group of the big ones, in the top 20. And that gives us a significant opportunity for influence. So we're facing this global threat. We're one of the bigger polluters. That means that we have an opportunity. We're also one of the biggest exporters of coal and gas. So that means that we, when you put that all together, we come up to something like a top 5. So we are significant in the global environment. And I think when people say, you know, we're too small to make a difference, I always say back to them, well, you could have said that on any other issue. You know, World War II, we're too small to make a difference. We shouldn't bother getting involved. You know, whaling, international trade, basically terrorism, any of these other issues, we can say, you know, we're too small, we won't bother. Well, we are a pretty decent sized country. We have a big contribution on this issue. We should be getting involved because it's materially influences our future prosperity. So that's that issue aside. What is the jobs in renewables relative to fossil fuels? I mentioned earlier that fossil fuels are increasingly an automated industry. So job losses in fossil fuels have occurred primarily due to automation and also due to plants being shut down in their natural time frame. So there's been only a few plants that have been shut down as a consequence of the accelerated transition. In terms of what does it mean for fossil fuel workers though, long term, because we will need a bigger transition and things will probably speed up. There needs to be very targeted transition policies in a range of different places in Australia to make sure there is adequate retraining, but also when we're doing the investment in things like renewable energy zones, they can be put in those locations. So for instance, in Gippsland in Victoria, there's already excellent transmission infrastructure due to the coal power stations that are already there. So why not locate the renewable energy zone in that area, which is exactly what the Victorian government is thinking of doing, so you can capitalise on those resources and then use the solar resource in that area. So there's talk of doing a floating solar farm, for instance, on the Hazelwood mine pits. So there's some innovative ways in which we can look at these problems.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think we are now out of time for questions, and I do believe we've probably covered all of them. Apologies if I have missed anybody, but thank you so much. I'll hand over to Karen if you've got any comments to make, and then David will be giving a vote of thanks. Thank you. Karen.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Amanda. As I say, I owe you for your last minute jumping in to take Tim's place. And it's been a very helpful session, I think, to introduce our club and our interested friends to the new group and the kind of things we'll be talking about. We'll be talking about all those issues that you've mentioned and plus the questions. Hand over to David to give you a vote of thanks.
Thanks, Karen. And Amanda, thank you so much for taking the time. This was couldn't have found a better way to launch this, this climate action group than to have the wonderful spaceship overview that you provided for us. You helped us to understand that if we just get into Elon Musk's spacecraft and move a little bit further away, we can actually see that the essence of the problem is quite simple in that it's a warming issue, and there are many of course matters that lead up to the warming, but it actually is quite simple at some level. Fatima mentioned that we Rotarians sort of thrive on hope. And I think that your presentation certainly was very hopeful. I'm reminded of the old expression, never waste a crisis. And it seems to me that you've demonstrated how you can, make good out of a crisis situation. Karen mentioned in her earlier comments that climate change is a wicked problem. Wicked in the sense that there's so many infinitely interconnected issues that it seems to be impossible to tease anything out. And unfortunately, that can be a recipe for despair. I think that you've shown that it can be also a recipe for the opposite, because even small actions in an interconnected world can have huge consequences. So those who say Australia is too small to make a difference, or those who think that this, there's nothing that I individually can do to make a difference, are actually quite wrong. And all we need to do is motivate us as individuals and motivate the government on behalf of the country to take any step in the right direction. Because whatever step you do take in an interconnected world is going to have benefits and impacts that we cannot now imagine. So we shouldn't be too fussed about it being wicked. Wicked is not necessarily negative, it's positive as well. And I'd just leave you with the last comment again, Fatima, that there's no future in pessimism. And I think you've given us a lot of positivity to think about. So on behalf of the whole group, thank you so much for your presentation. I think people are trying to applaud, but they're in silence.
We can do it without, if you want. Let's unmute people if you want. Unmute.
Okay, you're able to unmute yourself?
Yes, unmute yourself. Let's do it properly.
Thank you, thank you.
Get them all.
Okay. Thank you so much, Amanda. Again, I want to reiterate our appreciation, a very informative, motivational, and engaging talk. We really appreciate your time and appreciate as well you stepping in last minute. So very grateful to you. Thanks a lot. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the today, or you're welcome to leave as well. Please feel free to do whatever you like. I know you're a busy lady, so thank you again. Rotarians, before we conclude today's meeting, I have a couple of announcements for us to consider. As you know, since following the highly successful Rotary Centenary Baton launch on the 10th of January in Canberra, with the Governor General, the Rotary Club of Sydney is engaging with Rotary clubs in New South Wales and beyond to promote the centenary. So we are forming a team of our 100 champions. The role of the champions is to promote the Rotary Centenary, to represent our Rotary Club at Rotary 100 events in New South Wales, and to work with myself and the chair of the Rotary Club of Sydney Centenary Committee, Jeff Wilbur, to organise events for the centenary. While most of the activities for the centenary will be held in the first half of 2021, we need to know who we should call upon. And really, we need your support in this. We are also aware that all our planning or any planning must consider that COVID-19 restrictions keep changing and events may have to be cancelled or modified at last minute. So I will follow up with an email in my regular communication to all of you, but note please that Jeff Wilbur is compiling a list of champions. So if you want to be our 100 champion, please either contact me or contact Jeff, and I really encourage you to do so. And if you're interested, we can talk with you about what the role entails. Another announcement I have is the International Committee need members. So I know now we're not meeting face-to-face, we're meeting via Zoom, so committing yourself to be part of a committee should be much, much easier via Zoom. It shouldn't take much of your time, 1 hour a month, and different activities if you can support us. So if you're interested, please contact Bernard McLeod. And there are also 3 projects for the International Committee that need to be passed on. So I encourage you again to think about participating in that committee and bring in your skill sets and your ideas to that group. We have our club foundation committee is meeting on this Wednesday, July the 22nd at 5 p.m. So the link is on our website and is on Club Runner as well. On Tuesday, our next meeting, Tuesday the 28th of July, is going to be in the evening. The reason for that is at 6 p.m. we have a speaker coming from Sweden. He will be talking to us directly from Sweden. So we're accommodating his time frame. His name is Robert Orell. He's a former, I could say, an alt-right, a neo-Nazi who has moved on from that perspective, and for the last 18 years he has been working in the field of disengagement and from violent political extremism. He's a well-known speaker internationally, and I really invite you to come to that talk. He has been for 10 years, he worked as a director of Exit Sweden. In 2010 he set up the sister program Passes, supporting disengagement from organized criminal gangs. So please keep that on your in your diary, and we have invitations sent out to you, will be sent out to you soon as well to remind you of that meeting. The details of that is on the website. Send to your friends and colleagues, to your networks. We really would like to have as many people attending that session as possible. Not every day we have a speaker coming to us from Sweden, and such distinguished speaker. So please promote it as much as you can. And the other thing is, for those of you who are asking about face-to-face meeting, I know we are very keen to meet, but with the circumstances now, I think we need to put this on hold for a while, probably until the end of the year. In the meantime, we will try as much as we can to connect with you via Zoom, or we will host small gatherings. Last week we went to the Museum of Contemporary Art. There were a few people attending there, but it's still opportunity for some who wish to really connect with others while maintaining the social distancing in a controlled environment. These are opportunities, and we'll keep providing them to you as well. But if you have any other ideas about getting together, connecting while maintaining the social distancing, please let us know. Let me know, or let Glenn know with any of your ideas. Finally, I want to thank all of you who are participating in today's meeting. From wherever you are, in Australia, in Sydney, in the regions, in the US, Nepal, or wherever you are, thank you so much for participating in today's meeting. I hope you have learned a few additional information, you have been engaged, and wish you a very safe week. Stay safe, stay connected, and we'll see you next week. Thank you so much. And for those, you're welcome. And for those who wish to stay for a chat, the line is still open until 2 o'clock. So please stay on. But if you wish to leave, this is the end of our meeting for today. Thank you again. It's always nice to see your faces. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Fatima. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Fatima. Bye-bye.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye, Di.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Di.
Anybody
Bye.
who wants to unmute themselves, they can do for this informal part of the meeting.
Yes, please stay if you wish. We can chat.
I certainly am looking forward to the next week's meeting. That's a very interesting speaker.
I know.
It sounds like, I haven't heard anything about him, but I mean,
It's on the website. Karen wants to raise her hand. Karen.
Thanks, Fatima. I just wanted to tell people that are still on that I'm staying on just for a little bit. I've got another meeting at 2, but if anyone wants to ask me a question, please feel free. We don't have to do it on the chat. You can just ask anytime.
Karen, if you want people to participate on your committee.
Absolutely. I want everyone
Yes.
to participate.
Okay. So do they just contact you?
I think we'll be able to put it out in your newsletter. We'll put out the first meeting is on the 10th of August.
Okay.
5:30, and anybody that wants to come in on the meeting, a bit like the peace group, you know, anyone can come and join and listen to what's happening. It will be me as the speaker because I'll go through a whole range of things, and I'm looking for ideas, I'm looking for questions, and I'll tell people what I'm planning, and people can come and bring me suggestions of what they'd like to hear about.
Fantastic. I know you've been working very hard collecting information and learning about the topic.
As my
Thank
son's
you.
brain is in brain explosion.
And congratulations for today as well. Amanda is a great speaker, but I know you've worked so hard as well to get this.
Thank you.
Yeah. Who do we have online? We've got number 77. I don't know who's number 77.
Oh, Lena's got her hand up.
Lena's got a hand up. Lena, please unmute yourself, Lena. Can't. We have to unmute her.
Oh, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Oh, okay, now I can. Now I can. Thank you. I just wanted to ask, given the medium that we're using now, Karen, you can have international members of the Climate Action Group, so it can become quite a wide-reaching climate action group. The same with the peace building group, I guess. So we can have members from other clubs or other places in the world.
Yes, the gentleman from Nepal already asked. Remembering that when we go off Zoom meetings, we may stay on Zoom meetings for committee meetings, particularly the climate group, because there's a number of clubs interested in what we're doing.
Yes.
So it's good to have everyone. But we really do want to be doing local projects too. So you know, that's going to be a bit complicated, but certainly everyone is welcome to come and listen to the meetings and what we're doing. And we'd love to hear what's happening in other countries.
Yes,
I think that's really, this is a global thing, and in a way it's very encouraging that we are in a global context, but it also makes it easier to share ideas and solutions.
Ranjiv, good to see you. Good to have you with us as well.
Thank you. And I'm very much interested in the climate change, as I was the advocate for the climate change from 2009 to 11 in Nepal at the minister level. And when I saw the climate change something in the Facebook, then you know, I was so excited, and so I quickly joined the meeting.
Fantastic.
So thank you. I think this is a new group, so it will, yeah, and we will share our experience, and because it is a global concern and the different country has a different problem. Right now we have having the climate change induced disaster in Nepal, so does in Australia, like the bushfire, where I have been looking a long time. So yeah, it will be helpful. Maybe this is just initial. We are in the initial phase, and in the coming time, I think we can do a much more better with the expertise we have.
Great. Thank you, Ranjiv. Yes.
Karen, Mark Dyer sent me a message. We were trying to get him unmuted. He just wants to pass on his congratulations to you. A very big day for our club, he says.
Thank you.
Yes, it is indeed. Indeed. Yes. Yeah. Lena.
I think I was going to say I might have to consider what time our meetings are on, that people can join from other parts of the planet.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. I have to look at what the time differences are. There might be some better time of the day.
Probably in the afternoon, early evening.
Yeah. Well, at the moment it's 5.
Yeah. Yeah. Lena.
And also through your membership with ESRAG, Karen, we can possibly, I mean, it's possible for us to do, you know, one of our projects to be kind of like copied in different places. So it becomes kind of an internationally done thing that everybody's trying, and then we can assess, we can collect data from what the results from all the different jurisdictions. So that's also possible, because given our, I mean, this is one way of leveraging Rotary, isn't it? The international connections that we have. So we can look at one of our projects being something that's possibly can be copied in different places, and we are doing it all at once, and we have very definite data that we're collecting from the different places. So I don't know, that's something we can think about.
Tony, you can't unmute. Oh, you're unmuted.
I was having trouble as well. Once I mute myself.
No, I only unmute when I'm speaking. Remember, I use captioning with Zoom, and I also lip read, and I use the single screen. So if I unmute, it's going to make the system harder for me to use captioning, but also it means that I can't necessarily see who is speaking to lip read.
I see. Yeah, yeah. But I have a message from Tony, who's not allowed to unmute. Is that, did you have that experience as well, Tony? Tony, you can unmute.
Yeah. I don't know what Glenn's doing to me, but it's okay now, thanks.
Okay.
I set the option at the end there to allow participants to unmute.
Yeah.
It's all going now.
Takes impact immediately. But anyway, we'll learn the idiosyncrasies.
Yes, we will. We will. I still would like to do a breakup room sometime if we have a topic that we can break up into different group to discuss, and have a different forms of a different way of meeting in a way. So you'll have it in a group. You'll have in a room like this number of people. You might, if you have 40 or 50 people attending, you might have 7 in every room or 10 in every room. It makes the conversation nice if you're having a topic to discuss, and people can connect differently as well. So
yeah, it's a good idea. Works well.
Yeah. So actually, I might do that if we have. We'll have to think about how people we connect. What? I mean,
We'll have a
I'm
practice run.
Yeah, we'll practice run before we do it. Yes. Jeff, you're quiet.
Do remember that Zoom has been upgraded now. So
Yeah.
if you go into a particular chat room and you don't like the people in the chat room, or you wanted to speak to someone else in another chat room, you leave the meeting altogether. You then come back into the meeting and you should be put into a different chat room.
Yeah.
The other thing is that you can predetermine before the meeting who goes into a chat room.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then if you don't like the chat room you're in, you leave the meeting and then come back in and you'll be in a
Yes.
different chat room. Very
Yeah.
convenient.
Yeah, it is. It's about planning beforehand. Thank you, Ronnie. Jeff, we haven't heard much from you today.
You haven't heard much from me today. Well,
Yes.
I've
We
been
heard
engrossed
yesterday.
in the conversation. So, well, now I'm here. Firstly, congratulations to Karen.
Yes.
I've said since she first muted this idea that it was a great initiative for the club. So, well done, and
It
I'm
is
glad
indeed.
it went off so well. I thought your speaker was excellent.
She was.
Very informative, very matter of fact. We understood the issues and helped us
Yes.
a lot.
Yes.
And if I could, whilst you've invited me in, let me also say to both the Fatima and to Glenn, we've only had a couple of meetings with you, Per, but well done. And it's great to see Glenn back involved in the club and doing a great job as Sergeant at Arms. So well done.
He is really well done. Yeah,
And
managing.
he hasn't fined us once.
No. We were talking about a mechanism for finding people today early on. How can we do it? Like we have a button that we press and people will know that they've been fined or something.
Just send me your bank account details.
You know what? There is something that in engineering, in my school of engineering, they used to do every year for all engineering students, first years, that we all had to weigh the garbage from our households and report on that on a weekly basis. And Karen, given your initiative, we can do that. And then the one with the highest, weight is the one that has to pay a fine on a weekly basis,
Well, I was pleased there was an opportunity to donate to Rotary Give Every Child a Future as you booked for this meeting.
Yes.
I think in a couple of weeks I'll have a chance to remind everyone that $45 will cover the immunisation of one child in the Pacific. So that's and you can get a tax deduction on it. So
yes, yeah. I think we're going to put that for every meeting now. It's going to be regular. Val, it's good to have you with us.
Thanks, Fatima. Yes, it was great presentation.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I hope you continue to join us at our meetings.
Thank you. Yes, I'd love to.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And I noticed Rajiv, I'm not sure whether he's still on, but he's from Dalikal. Well, I've got a rocks project in Nepal.
You did say that. I couldn't have a chat on the chat thing. But what is your project?
It's to support the United Mission Hospital. We've got a paediatric surgeon here, and that's how I got involved. He goes there every now and then to volunteer his services.
Okay. Yes.
And I wrote quickly before I went away for 3 days in early June, before any hotspots appeared.
Yeah.
I wrote quickly to her and said, "Oh, please stay safe. How are things going over there?" And when I got back, she said the Indian borders that were meant to be closed, they had to let 2 million seasonal workers in from India back to Nepal, and they had to isolate in crowded schools. So on the 1st of May, they had 59 cases and no deaths, and now they're up to 18,000 confirmed cases and 40 deaths.
Oh dear, sad.
Yeah.
Really sad.
Because they had no provisions to isolate it at the border when they came in.
No.
So I don't know how they got to their municipalities. They weren't allowed to isolate at home, but she said the schools were overcrowded and it's just spreading like wildfire.
I feel for seasonal workers or for those like casual workers that go to places in the Middle East and other places as well, where they don't have any protection. Like there are a lot of nannies and a lot of housekeeper, like workers in many of these countries. They don't have much of a protection as well. And some of them are left on the streets and some of them are told to go back home and they have no support whatsoever.
Well, it's respiratory, and I sat in on the Rotary Club in France back in April, and the guest speaker was a top surgeon from Milan, and he was talking about his work in Italy, because that's where all the hotspots were, near somewhere up the north near Milan, and it was just incredible. And Four Corners this week was all about the medical side of COVID as well.
Yes,
and,
exactly.
And we need masks. So Victoria, they're doing the right thing. You need masks. I mean, we should have been doing that 6 months ago, not not just now.
The carry-on effects are quite frightening. I mean, as Fatima knows, one of the charities we started was Vision Beyond Oz, which does eye surgery in the third world, India and Nepal and Cambodia and Myanmar. Well, a lot of those operations are just not able to be conducted at the moment, so it's just another flow-on effect that, and once again, it's the poor of the world who get disadvantaged in this far more than anybody else. They just can't get those operations done because of the COVID situation.
Yeah.
Just
So
briefly,
it just goes fine.
Just briefly before Karen comes in, I have to go now. I've got the recording running on mine, but I think it's okay to finish the recording now anyway.
Yeah. Finish it. Yes.
Okay.
I think we finish it. Thank you, Glenn, so much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.
We're going to leave you too, Fatima. So all the best.
Thank you both.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Sure.
Bye. Karen, you want to say something?
Well, I was.
Sorry, too many things.
But it's an interesting question. So my office, when we first started with COVID, we bought an enormous box of masks, an enormous box of gloves, sanitizer, whatever we needed, until we couldn't come in anymore. We used very, very little. We got all that was available. It was like a box of, I don't know, 250 masks. What can Rotary do with all these masks? I mean, the medical centres wouldn't take an open box, I'm sure, because that wouldn't be hygienic, I imagine. The same with the gloves. What do we do with a couple of hundred masks? And there's a shortage of masks. So
we can keep them if you like for the Anzac Day barbecue, but if Val has some, underprivileged people to receive it, that would be better.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm thinking about in our community in Sydney, how many people will not be particularly homeless and others of vulnerable population. Similar when we did the winter appeal, there will be a group of people who will not have access to them and cannot afford to buy them.
Maybe we should talk to Kathy about the winter appeal and whether these could be used somewhere. And I was going to ask Val about your background there. The picture behind your head looks like a bunch of aeroplanes. I hope they're flying on renewable energy.
Sorry, flying on the what was that?
Renewable energy.
Oh, they're actually extinct now.
Yes.
They're the Concords.
Yes, they're extinct.
They were certainly not renewable energy. Very expensive.
I'm afraid I have to go too, otherwise I won't get a bathroom stop before my next meeting.
Okay, before you go, Karen, just talk to Sonu. Talk to Sonu about the masks.
Oh, Sonu, yeah. Good idea.
Yeah, because he had the project. We were going to flag it for the Disaster Response Fund with Di, and then he got too busy. So we were going to create. He called it a dignity kit, and part of it was going to be a mask. So have a chat with him, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I think
we'll do.
That's a good idea.
Here's my material mask from Nepal last year. I got acute bronchitis from the pollution and the dust.
That's a good one. There are quite few of them now,
So-
material, made from material on
Yeah,
sale.
Sort of got a mesh over them. I just throw them in the washing machine.
Yes, yes.
So bye.
Bye, Karen. Well
Bye,
done again.
everybody.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well done. Bye-bye. Roni, did you want to say something?
Thank you. For some reason, I keep on being banned from unmuting. Yeah, I was going to say, in New South Wales, it's currently optional to wear a mask, but not mandatory, like Victoria. But I would suggest when you are out in the public, you do wear it. Because it will decrease the opportunity of the transmission from the mouth up to 90%, and it can make a big difference. And when you look at the neurological effects that COVID can have on you, let alone even just the tiredness and others, blood clotting, heart, lung disease, wearing of a mask that's washable or even a one-use is so easy and makes such a big difference. It can make the difference of being alive or dead.
And it's long lasting. There's a lot of research going now for people who got the virus, because it's like early on in February, March, and they're still suffering from the after effect as well, lethargy and few other things as well. And they don't know the impact on the brain. It's worrying, really.
Well, there's a candidate that was talking on the TV last night. She's in America, a dark-skinned candidate. I'm not sure the political correct terms to use. And she's 34 weeks pregnant and she's positive.
Oh dear.
So,
sad.
And they're
really
just
sad.
Well, the vulnerable age group in Nepal apparently is between 20 and 40. And we had a Zoom meeting with some people in Kathmandu, and they said there was one pregnant lady who passed away. I don't know how pregnant she was, so I presume the baby died as well. I'm not sure.
You know, my neurologist was following what was happening in China right in the beginning. Now, the type of cerebral palsy I have, very few people have. The base of my cerebellum has been affected before birth. When you scan it, you see a black dot in there, which if you don't know what you're looking at, it may look like similar to MS, but isn't, and it affects the right side of my body. But in seeing what happened with the Chinese in there, quite deadly on the neurological side of it, or what can happen. Admittedly, there's only about 6 people in Australia that have the same condition as what I do, cerebral palsy-wise. But when we look across countries on how it's affecting people in the same way, it's absolutely horrible and disturbing. And if you do survive it, the amount of cost that's going